The neon lights of the Ruby Nights Club flashed in time with the music, bathing Flamingo Street in pink light. It was 6:30 on Thursday evening, and Lola Johnson stood in front of the mirror in the dressing room, putting the finishing touches to her makeup. 23 years old, 3 years working at this club, and she still felt a slight nausea before every shift. "Another night in paradise," she muttered, looking at her reflection. The shiny top barely covered her breasts, and the miniskirt was so short that it looked more like a wide belt. Lola adjusted her long black curls and sighed. The money she sent to her mother in Detroit for diabetes treatment was worth the humiliation. The dressing room door opened slightly, and Tommy Sullivan peeked inside. 26 years old, blonde hair, always slightly tousled, and those gray-blue eyes that had seen too much for his age. "Lola, are you ready? The crowd is gathering," he said, carefully avoiding looking at her outfit. Tommy had been working as a bartender at Ruby Nights for 4 years and was the only person in the establishment Lola trusted. "As ready as you can be for this circus," she replied, getting up from her chair. "How's the crowd looking?" "The usual Thursday crowd, a few businessmen, a group of tourists from Canada, a couple of local regulars. Oh, and Mr. Rodriguez wants to see you before your shift starts." Lola froze. Frank Rodriguez, the 45-year-old club owner, was someone she tried to avoid. His office on the second floor was where special negotiations with the dancers took place. "Did he say why?" Tommy shook his head. "He just wants to talk." "But Lola..." He lowered his voice. "Be careful. He talked to Christina for a long time yesterday, and she didn't come to work this morning. She says she's sick." Lola nodded. Christina was one of the club's most popular dancers, and her sudden illness seemed suspicious. All the girls knew that Frank sometimes offered them extra earnings with particularly generous clients, but no one talked about it openly. Climbing the narrow staircase to the second floor, Lola knocked on the office door. "Come in," said a deep voice with a slight Spanish accent. Frank Rodriguez sat at a massive oak desk, looking through some documents. He was a man of medium height, with graying temples and attentive brown eyes. A large diamond wedding ring sparkled on his hand. On the walls hung photographs of the club from different years and several diplomas from the local Chamber of Commerce. "Lola, have a seat," he said, pointing to a leather armchair across from the desk. "How are you? How's your mother?" "Thank you for asking, Mr. Rodriguez. Mom is recovering. The treatment is helping." Frank nodded, put down the documents, and looked at her intently. "It's good that you have a goal. That's important in our business. Speaking of business, I have an offer for you." Lola's heart skipped a beat. She knew where this was going. "An important client from California is coming to see us tonight. An investor, considering investing in our business. A very wealthy, very influential man. He asked for special company for the evening." "Mr. Rodriguez, I dance. I don't..." "Lola," he raised his hand, stopping her. "It's just company. Dinner at a nice restaurant, a few cocktails, pleasant conversation, nothing more. $5,000 for one evening. Think how many treatments you could pay for your mother." $5,000. Lola earned about $3,000 a month, including tips. That amount would solve her problems for several months. "What if he wants more?" Frank smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Lola, you're a smart girl. You'll decide for yourself what's acceptable to you. But think carefully. Opportunities to make big money don't come along every day. I need time to think about it." "Of course. Let me know by 10 o'clock tonight. If you agree, we'll meet at 11 in the lobby of the Bellagio Hotel." Lola nodded and stood up, feeling her knees tremble. As she left the office, she heard Frank dialing someone's number. "Mr. Collins?" "Yes. Everything is going according to plan. The girl is suitable, just as you requested." Going downstairs, Lola walked into the main hall. Ruby Nights was filling up with the evening crowd. Behind the bar, Tommy was mixing cocktails, glancing at her with concern. Melissa was dancing on stage to the song "Pour Some Sugar on Me," and several men in expensive suits were watching her every move intently. Lola walked over to Tommy. "Whiskey double." "What did he want?" Tommy asked, pouring whiskey into a glass. "He offered me a job, a well-paid job." Tommy frowned. "Lola, don't get involved with this. I've seen what happens to other girls after offers like that. They change. They become different." 5,000, Tommy, for one night. Mom will be able to complete the new therapy course. And then what? Do you think he'll leave you alone after the first time? It doesn't work that way, Lola. Once you agree, you're no longer just a dancer. You become part of a different business. Lola downed the whiskey in one gulp, feeling the alcohol burn her throat. In the corner of the room, she noticed a familiar figure. Christina was sitting at a table with an elderly man in an expensive suit. Her face was pale, and her eyes seemed empty. When their eyes met, Christina quickly looked away. "I need to get ready to go on," Lola said, but Tommy grabbed her arm. "Promise me you'll think it over. Money isn't everything." "In our world, money is survival," she replied, and headed for the stage. The music faded, and the DJ announced, "And now, welcome the beautiful Lola." Lola took the stage to the sounds of a slow song. The spotlights blinded her, and for a moment she felt safe in this cocoon of light. Here, dancing, she could forget everything. Her sick mother, the medical bills, Frank's proposal. But when the song ended and she stepped off the stage, reality hit her with renewed force. Several men held out bills to her, their eyes full of lust. One of them, a fat man with gold teeth, tried to grab her hip. "How much for a private dance, beautiful?" $100, Lola replied, backing away. "And for something more interesting?" Lola felt her insides clench. This was the future that awaited her if she turned down Frank's offer. Endless nights full of innuendo and unpleasant touches, slow degradation for pennies. At 9:30, she went back up to Frank's office. He was sitting in the same place, as if he hadn't moved. "I agree," she said quietly. Frank smiled and nodded. "Excellent choice, Lola. Mr. Collins will be very pleased." 2 weeks passed in the usual rhythm. Lola danced every night, sent her mother money for the meeting with Mr. Collins, and tried not to think about what had happened that night at the Bellagio Hotel. The meeting turned out exactly as she had feared. Dinner quickly moved to a hotel room, and the pleasant conversation turned into what the $5,000 was actually for. On Wednesday morning, Lola sat in the waiting room of the Planned Parenthood clinic in West Charleston, nervously twisting the strap of her purse. She had come here for a routine checkup, something she had done every 6 months since she started working at the club. The white walls, the smell of disinfectant, and the quiet conversations of other patients created an atmosphere that always made her feel uncomfortable. "Lola Johnson?" called a nurse in a blue uniform. In the office, Dr. Martinez, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, was reviewing the test results on her computer. Lola sat down across from her, feeling her heart begin to beat faster with familiar anxiety. "Lola, we need to talk about the results." Dr. Martinez turned to her, and the look on her face made Lola's stomach clench. The HIV test came back positive. The world around Lola seemed to stop. The sounds of the clinic became muffled, and the doctor's voice seemed to come from far away. What does that mean?" she whispered, even though she knew the answer perfectly well. "It means that the human immunodeficiency virus has been detected in your blood. But it's important to understand that HIV is not a death sentence today, with the right treatment." "No." Lola stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "No, that's impossible. I've always been careful. Always." Dr. Martinez said something about therapy, about how the virus could be suppressed to undetectable levels, about how people with HIV live full lives. But Lola wasn't listening. One thought kept running through her head. Collins. That night, a month ago. Running out of the clinic, Lola got into her old Honda and burst into tears. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smearing her mascara, and a rage she had never felt before grew in her chest. Frank. It was all because of Frank and his special offers. If it weren't for him, she would never have agreed to meet Collins. It was only 3 in the afternoon, but Lola drove to the club. She needed someone to talk to, and Tommy was the only person she could trust with this news. Ruby nights looked completely different during the day. Dim lights, empty tables, and only quiet music in the background. Tommy was washing glasses behind the bar, preparing for the evening shift. When he saw Lola, he immediately realized that something was wrong. "Lola? What's wrong? You look..." "Tommy." She approached the bar, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "I need to tell you something." He put down the towel and looked at her intently. "Go ahead." "I have HIV." Tommy froze, the glass in his hands almost slipping out. "What?" "I got the results this morning. HIV positive." Lola sat down on a bar stool, feeling her legs buckle. Tommy walked around the bar and hugged her. No questions, no judgment, just warm arms holding her as she cried again. "It's because of that meeting, isn't it?" he asked quietly, when the tears had subsided a little. Lola nodded. "Collins. Frank knew. He knew what kind of man he was, and he sent me to him anyway." "Lola, we don't know for sure." "We do," she snapped. "Tommy, before that meeting, I'd been with 2 guys in my whole life. Both passed the test, both were clean. A month after Collins, I have HIV. Coincidence? I don't think so." Tommy poured her some water and sat down next to her. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." Lola took a sip of water, her hands still shaking. "The doctor talked about treatment, about pills. But it's for life, Tommy. Every day. And the money, how much is it all going to cost?" "What about Frank? Are you going to tell him?" Lola looked at him, and anger flashed in her eyes. "I will, but not the way you think." At that moment, the club door opened and Frank walked in. Seeing them at the bar, he headed toward them with a broad smile. "Lola, how are you, dear? Mr. Collins was very pleased with your meeting. He said you made an unforgettable impression on him." Lola felt everything boiling inside her. "Unforgettable," she repeated, struggling to control herself. "By the way, I have another client. He's also very generous, also from California. Interested?" "No," Lola replied sharply. Frank raised his eyebrows in surprise. "No? Lola, it's good money, easy money." "I said no." She stood up from her chair, looking him straight in the eye. "And don't ever offer me that kind of work again." Frank frowned. "Lola, I hope you haven't forgotten who feeds you here. The club is a business, and business requires flexibility." "Your business almost killed me," she said quietly, but clearly. "What are you talking about?" Lola looked at Tommy, who shook his head slightly. She understood his concern. It would be unwise to openly accuse Frank now, but she couldn't keep quiet any longer. "Nothing," she replied finally. "Just no more meetings. I'll just dance." Frank shrugged. "As you wish. But remember, opportunities don't wait forever." When he left for his office, Tommy breathed a sigh of relief. "Lola, you almost did something stupid." "Maybe I should have," she replied. "Tommy, he keeps doing it. With other girls. Christina, Melissa, how many more girls will suffer? What do you suggest? Go to the police? Do you have any evidence? And even if you do, who would believe a stripper over a respected businessman?" Lola knew he was right. Frank was smart and careful. Formally, he didn't force anything. He just offered opportunities. And what happened next was supposedly the girl's personal choice. Then what? Just accept it? Keep dancing while he ruins other people's lives? Tommy took her hands. "Lola, the most important thing right now is you. Your health, your treatment. Don't ruin your life for revenge." But Lola wasn't listening to him anymore. A plan was forming in her head. If official justice was unavailable, then justice would have to come in another form. Frank had ruined her life by sending her to a sick client. Now it was his turn to be punished. In the evening, during her shift, Lola watched Frank. He talked to clients, flirted with new dancers, and made plans to expand his business. He was a man who had everything: money, power, respect in business circles. He was married, had children, and had a reputation as a successful entrepreneur. But what if that reputation collapsed? What if his wife found out what her husband was really doing? What if his business partners discovered the truth about the club's additional services? But simple exposure seemed insufficient. Frank was rich and well-connected. He could wriggle out of the scandal, pay off whoever he needed to, and shift the blame onto someone else. And she would be left with nothing: sick, disgraced, destroyed. No. If she was going to act, it had to be in a way that would give him real punishment, so that he would feel the same thing she had felt that morning in the doctor's office. "Lola, are you okay?" Christina asked as she walked by. She looked better than she had 2 weeks ago, but there was still a look of caution in her eyes. "Christina," Lola stopped her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That client Frank introduced you to, did he force you to do anything?" Christina's face paled. "Lola, you're better off not getting involved in this. Seriously, some things are better left forgotten." "What if I tell you I'm not going to forget?" Christina looked around, made sure no one was listening, and moved closer. "His name is Rick Collins. He has special needs. Frank knows about it and still sends girls to him. He says the money is worth it." She paused. "Lola, promise me you won't do anything stupid. Frank is a dangerous man. He has ways of keeping people quiet. And I," Lola said quietly, "have ways of making him pay." A week had passed since the diagnosis. Lola spent those days carefully studying Frank's habits, his schedule, his weaknesses. She learned that on Fridays, he usually stayed late at the club, checking the takings and planning events for the weekend. His wife, Lisa, attended yoga classes on Fridays and met up with her friends, not returning home until midnight. Lola also discovered something else. Frank, despite his ostensible loyalty to his family, was no stranger to affairs on the side. Several dancers hinted at his attempts to get closer to them, and Melissa once let slip that he had invited her to dinner at an expensive restaurant and unambiguously suggested continuing the evening at a hotel. On Thursday evening, Lola went to a drugstore on Strip Avenue and bought a small pen camera, which was advertised as a device for recording lectures. The salesman, a young guy with tattoos, didn't even look up when she paid in cash. Friday began as usual. Lola arrived at the club around 7 in the evening, changed her clothes, and started her shift. But today, she danced differently. Every movement was calculated to attract Frank's attention. She knew he was watching her from his office, where panoramic windows allowed him to control the entire hall. At 9:30, she went up to him on the pretext of discussing the schedule for the following week. Frank was sitting at his computer, reviewing financial reports. "Mr. Rodriguez, sorry to bother you. Can we talk about the schedule?" He looked up and stared at her intently. Lola had deliberately chosen the most revealing outfit, black lace lingerie that was more suited to private dances than the main stage. "Of course, Lola. Have a seat." She sat down, crossing her legs, and noticed his gaze sliding over her figure. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior last week. I wasn't myself. I snapped at you." Frank leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "It's okay. Everyone has difficult days. You're a good dancer, Lola. One of the best." "Thank you." She stood up and walked over to the window overlooking Las Vegas at night. "You know, sometimes I think I was wrong to turn down your offers. I really need the money." Frank stood up and walked over to her. Lola could feel his breath on her neck. "The offers are still on the table. The right people are always willing to pay for quality company. What about you?" Lola turned to him, their faces inches apart. Have you ever needed company? Frank froze. A flicker of desire mixed with caution flashed in his eyes. Lola, it's complicated. I have a family, a reputation. I understand. She ran her hand over his chest. But sometimes even the most cautious people deserve a little pleasure. The next half hour seemed like an eternity to Lola. Frank, as she had expected, couldn't resist. A hidden camera in her purse, which she had strategically placed on the table, recorded every minute. Lola forced herself to think about her mother, about the medical bills, about that day at the clinic, anything that would help her get through these moments. When it was over, Frank looked satisfied and relaxed. He adjusted his tie and poured himself a whiskey from the bar in the corner of the office. "That was unexpectedly pleasant," he said, handing her a glass. "For me too," Lola lied, mentally counting the days until the virus became detectable in his blood. Frank walked over to her and kissed her on the cheek. "This stays between us, you understand?" "Of course." On her way out of the office, Lola picked up her purse and felt relieved. The first part of the plan was complete. Now all that remained was to wait. The next morning, she sat down at the kitchen table in her small apartment on Oakland Avenue and began to write a letter. Every word came with difficulty, but she knew it had to be done. "To whom it may concern, my name is Lola Johnson, and I am 23 years old. I work as a dancer at the Ruby Nights strip club under the management of Frank Rodriguez. A month ago, Mr. Rodriguez forced me to meet with a client named Rick Collins under the guise of extra income. This meeting resulted in me contracting HIV. Mr. Rodriguez knew about Mr. Collins's tendencies and the risks involved, but deliberately concealed this information from me. Last night, October 27th, I deliberately infected Frank Rodriguez with the same virus. I have a video recording of our encounter. I did this not out of malice, but out of a sense of justice. If he ruined my life, he should suffer an equal punishment. I do not regret my actions. Frank Rodriguez is a predator who exploits the desperation of young women for his own gain. He sends girls to dangerous clients, knowing the possible consequences. Christina Valencia, Melissa Torres, and other dancers can confirm his coercive methods. With this letter, I admit my guilt in intentionally infecting Frank Rodriguez with HIV. Let justice prevail, even if it does not come through the courts. Lola Johnson, October 28, 2023. She reread the letter several times, sealed it in an envelope, and hid it in a box along with the flash drive on which she had copied the video recording. Nothing changed at the club for the next 3 weeks. Frank behaved as usual, managing staff, talking to customers, planning business expansion. Sometimes he would give Lola meaningful looks, but he no longer tried to get close to her. Perhaps the one-time affair was just a fleeting weakness for him. Lola began antiretroviral therapy. The pills cost almost $1,000 a month, but insurance covered most of the cost. Every morning, as she swallowed the bitter capsules, she thought about how Frank would soon be doing the same thing. On Monday, November 21st, Tommy noticed that something was wrong with Frank. "He's looked sick for the last few days," he said to Lola during their break. "He's pale and tired. And yesterday, I saw him taking some pills." Lola's heart beat faster. The first symptoms of HIV usually appeared 2 to 4 weeks after infection. If Frank was really sick, then the plan had worked. "Maybe he's just overworked," she replied, trying to keep her tone neutral. Frank didn't come to work on Wednesday. His deputy, Carlos, said that the boss had the flu and would be staying home for a few days. But Lola saw how worried Carlos looked and realized that this was no ordinary cold. On Thursday morning, while Lola was making breakfast, the phone rang. The club's number appeared on the display. "Lola, it's Frank." His voice sounded hoarse and tired. "Mr. Rodriguez, how are you feeling?" "Not very well. Listen, I need to ask you something. Can you come to my house? Carlos will give you the address." Lola felt a chill run down her spine. If Frank was calling her to his house, it meant he suspected something. "Of course, when is convenient?" "Now, if you can." Frank's house was located in the prestigious San Martin neighborhood, a 20-minute drive from the club. The two-story white building with a red tile roof and a well-kept garden looked like the epitome of the American dream. A white Lexus, Lisa's car, was parked at the entrance. Frank opened the door himself. He really did look ill. Pale face, dark circles under his eyes, trembling hands. He was wearing a bathrobe, which was unusual for a man who always appeared in front of his employees in impeccable suits. "Thank you for coming," he said, leading her into the living room. "Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you." They sat down in leather armchairs in front of the fireplace. Family photos hung on the walls, Frank with his wife and 2 children at the beach, at a ski resort, at a holiday dinner table. "Lola, I want to ask you about that evening 3 weeks ago, in my office." "What exactly?" Frank paused, gathering his thoughts. "Do you have any diseases that I should know about?" Lola looked into his eyes and saw fear. He knew, or suspected. "Mr. Rodriguez, what makes you think that?" "I went to the doctor yesterday. I had some tests done." His voice trembled. "Lola, if you're hiding something, it's better to tell me now. What if I tell you that I have HIV, and that I found out after we were intimate?" Frank turned even paler, his hands clenched into fists. "Is that true?" "It's true, but not the whole truth." Lola stood up and walked over to the window. The neighbors' children were playing in the yard, and their mother was hanging laundry on a clothesline. It was the ordinary life of ordinary people who had no idea that someone's world was falling apart just a few meters away from them. "The whole truth is that I was infected by your client, Collins, and I knew about my status when I was with you." The silence in the room became deafening. Frank slowly rose from his chair. You did this on purpose?" "Yes." "But why? What for?" Lola turned to him. "Because you sent me to the man who ruined my life. Because you knew about his illness and hid it from me. Because there are dozens like me, and you continue your game." Frank sank back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. "I have a wife, children. They mustn't find out." "Then you should have thought about that earlier." Footsteps sounded on the stairs, and a woman's voice called out, "Frank, dear, how are you feeling? I brought you some soup." Lisa Rodriguez came down the stairs carrying a tray. When she saw Lola, she stopped in surprise. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you had a guest." Frank looked up, and Lola saw panic in his eyes. "Lisa, this is Lola. She works at the club. We were discussing work matters." Lisa smiled, but her eyes betrayed her wariness. "Nice to meet you. Frank, maybe we should reschedule the meeting. You don't look well." "Yes, we were just finishing up," Lola said, heading for the exit. At the door, Frank caught her by the arm. "Lola, we'll talk about this later." "We will," she replied. "We have plenty of time, the rest of our lives." On Saturday morning, November 25th, Raul Martinez, the manager of the Oakland Gardens apartment complex, was climbing the stairs to the 3rd floor with an air conditioning repairman. The residents of apartment 312 had complained about a strange smell coming from the neighboring apartment. "She always paid on time," Raul said, taking out a bunch of keys. "Lola is a good girl, quiet. Maybe she just left and forgot to take out the trash." But when the door opened, it became clear that it wasn't trash. Lola Johnson was lying on the living room floor in her bathrobe next to an overturned bottle of pills. Her skin was pale, her eyes closed. A folded piece of paper lay on the coffee table. Raul immediately called the police. At 9:30 in the morning, Detective Sarah Chen parked her gray Toyota near the apartment complex. 38 years old, with 10 years in the homicide division, Sarah had seen enough deaths not to be shocked, but each new case still left its mark. Lola's apartment was small, a living room combined with a kitchen, 1 bedroom, and a bathroom. The furnishings were modest but neat. On the walls hung photographs of an elderly woman who looked like Lola, probably her mother. Magnets held medical bills and pharmacy receipts to the refrigerator. Medical examiner David Clark had already examined the body. Preliminary findings: overdose of sleeping pills, he told Sarah. A bottle of zomipidem, almost empty. The prescription is for 1 pill a night, but she clearly took a lot more. Sarah put on gloves and picked up a piece of paper from the coffee table. The handwriting was neat and feminine. I can no longer live with what I have done. Frank Rodriguez deserved to be punished for sending me to a sick client, but revenge has not brought me peace. I deliberately infected him with HIV, and now I cannot cope with the guilt. May my mother forgive me. Lola. Interesting, Sarah muttered. David, estimated time of death? Judging by the condition of the body and the temperature in the apartment, between midnight and 4 in the morning. Sarah photographed the note and the room, then called Officer Martinez to collect statements from the neighbors. Most of the residents had not seen or heard anything suspicious. Lola was a quiet neighbor who worked nights and rarely made noise. Elderly Mrs. Gonzalez from the apartment across the hall said she had seen Lola on Thursday evening. She looked upset. She hurried up the stairs without even saying hello. She usually smiled and asked how I was doing. Sarah found several numbers in Lola's address book. The first was Mom Detroit, followed by Tommy Work and Dr. Martinez. There were no other close contacts. The next stop was the Ruby Nights strip club. During the day, the place looked gloomy. Dim lights, empty tables, the smell of stale alcohol. Behind the bar, a young man was wiping glasses. "Tommy Sullivan?" Sarah asked, showing her badge. He nodded, and Sarah noticed his face turn pale. "This is about Lola Johnson. I'm Detective Chen, Homicide Division." Tommy put down the glass and grabbed the edge of the bar. She's dead?" "Unfortunately, yes. We found her body this morning. I need to ask you a few questions." Tommy stepped out from behind the bar and sat down at the nearest table. His hands were shaking. "When was the last time you saw Miss Johnson?" "Thursday night. She worked until 1 in the morning, then went home." "How did she seem? Her mood?" Tommy paused, gathering his thoughts. She had been tense for the last few weeks. Something was bothering her, but she didn't want to talk about it. "Did she have problems with any of her co-workers? Customers?" "No, nothing like that. Lola kept to herself. She danced, got tips, went home. She rarely talked to customers outside of work." Sarah took out a copy of the note. "Are you familiar with the name Frank Rodriguez?" Tommy's face turned even paler. "He's our boss, the club owner. The note we found next to Miss Johnson's body mentions that she deliberately infected him with HIV. Do you know anything about this?" Tommy covered his face with his hands. "My God, she really did that. What exactly did she do?" "Lola found out about her HIV status a few weeks ago. She blamed Mr. Rodriguez for infecting her, or rather, the client he sent her to. But I thought she was just angry, not..." "Tell me more about this client." Tommy told him about the extra services system that Frank practiced, about Lola's meeting with Collins, about her diagnosis and suspicions. "I tried to stop her. I told her that revenge wouldn't solve the problem, but she was so angry, so full of hatred." "Mr. Sullivan, in her note, Lola mentions feelings of guilt. Did she talk to you about thoughts of harming herself?" "No, never. Even when she found out about her illness, she talked about fighting, about treatment, about needing to live for her mother." Next, Sarah went to Frank Rodriguez. His house in San Martin looked peaceful in the midday sun, but when the door opened, it was clear that the owner was going through a difficult time. Frank was pale and gaunt. His eyes were red, his movements slow. "Mr. Rodriguez? Detective Chen, Las Vegas Police Department. May I come in?" He nodded and led her into the same living room where the conversation with Lola had taken place a few days earlier. "This is about Lola Johnson. She died last night." Frank didn't look surprised. He just nodded and sank into a chair. "I was expecting this call. Why? Because I knew she was desperate, after what happened between us. Sarah showed him the note. Frank read it and returned it without comment. Is it true, what she wrote? Yes. Lola deliberately infected me with HIV. She confessed it to me on Thursday. Tell me about your relationship with Miss Johnson. Frank told him about Lola's job at the club, about the proposal to meet with Collins, about that evening in the office a month ago. He spoke monotonously, without emotion, like a man who had already accepted his fate. After I found out about the diagnosis, I realized she could have done it on purpose. When she confessed, I was shocked, but not angry. More like desperate. Did you threaten her? Demand money? Promise to tell someone? No. I understood that I was to blame for what happened. If I hadn't sent her to Collins, nothing would have happened. Where were you on Thursday night? At home, with my wife. We watched a movie and went to bed around 11. Sarah spoke with Lisa Rodriguez, who confirmed her husband's alibi. The woman seemed concerned about Frank's condition, but clearly did not know the details of his illness. Back at the station, Sarah studied Lola's medical records. Dr. Martinez confirmed that the patient had tested positive for HIV 3 weeks ago, but had been irregular in taking her prescribed medication. She was depressed, the doctor explained. I recommended psychological help, but she refused. She said she could handle it herself. Toxicology tests confirmed death by overdose of zomipidem. The amount of the drug found in Lola's blood was 10 times the therapeutic dose. A search of the apartment revealed no signs of struggle or coercion. The door was locked from the inside, and the key was in the lock. The windows were closed, and there was no balcony in the apartment. The fingerprints on the pill bottle belonged only to Lola. Sarah interviewed several other club employees. Christina Valencia confirmed Tommy's story about extra services and mentioned that Lola had been withdrawn and nervous lately. She seemed to be carrying some kind of burden, Christina said. On Thursday, before leaving, she hugged me and said, "Take care of yourself." It seemed strange at the time. Melissa Torres told a similar story. Lola was a good girl, but she had looked sick for the last few weeks. She had lost weight and looked pale. And on Thursday evening, I saw her standing in front of the mirror in the locker room for a long time, just looking at herself. By evening, Sarah had gathered enough information for a preliminary conclusion. All the facts pointed to suicide. Lola had motives, a serious illness, guilt over revenge, depression. The note was written in her handwriting, as confirmed by graphological analysis. No one saw any strangers near her house on the night of her death. Frank Rodriguez had a motive for killing Lola, but his alibi was confirmed, and medical records showed that his condition in recent days had been critical. He could barely move without assistance. Sarah wrote in her report, "Preliminary conclusion, suicide by overdose of sleeping pills. Motive, depression due to HIV infection, and guilt over intentionally infecting another person." But something about the case bothered her. Maybe it was the convenient location of the note, or the fact that Lola, according to everyone who knew her, was a strong girl who fought for her mother's life. A girl who had been planning revenge for months, but suddenly broke down from guilt. Sarah decided to continue the investigation. On Monday morning, Detective Sarah Chen returned to the Lola Johnson case with a new plan. She had spent the weekend analyzing the case files, and several details were bothering her. First, according to Dr. Martinez, Lola had recently started antiretroviral therapy, which indicated a desire to fight the disease. Second, she had enough money in her bank account to pay for her mother's treatment for several months. It would be strange to give up everything right now. Sarah decided to take another close look at the note. The graphologist confirmed that the handwriting belonged to Lola, but a more detailed analysis revealed some interesting features. The pressure on the paper was uneven, and some of the letters were written with curls that were unusual for Lola. This could mean that the note was written under stress or under duress. The first stop was Lola's apartment. Sarah obtained permission for a second search and arrived there with forensic technician Mike Washington. This time, they were looking for clues they might have missed on the first day. "Look here," Mike said, examining the door jamb under a magnifying glass. "Scratches on the lock. Fresh. Someone recently picked the lock with a lockpick or similar tool." Sarah examined the scratches. They did look new, the metal shavings still glistening. But the door was locked from the inside, the key in the lock. Maybe someone came in while Lola was still alive, and then locked themselves in from the inside and left through the window? Sarah shook her head. "This is the 3rd floor. The windows face the courtyard. Too high and too noticeable." Mike continued his examination and found another oddity. On the floor near the sofa lay an earring, a small pearl stud. It didn't match Lola's style, who preferred large, bright jewelry. "Check it for fingerprints," Sarah asked, carefully placing the earring in an evidence bag. The next step was to take a closer look at the last days of Lola's life. Sarah reviewed the surveillance camera footage from the apartment complex. On Thursday night, Lola did indeed return home around 2 a.m. But on Friday, around 12:30 a.m., the camera captured a female figure near the entrance to the building. The quality of the recording was poor, but the silhouette and gait seemed familiar to Sarah. The detective returned to Frank Rodriguez's house. This time, she was interested not only in the owner's alibi, but also in his family's possible reaction to the situation. Lisa Rodriguez opened the door herself. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. The atmosphere in the house was tense. "Mrs. Rodriguez, can we talk again about the events of Thursday and Friday?" "Of course, but I've already told you everything. Frank and I were at home. He wasn't feeling well." "And you didn't go anywhere? Not even for a short time?" Lisa hesitated for a moment. No, I was home all evening." Sarah noticed the hesitation in her voice. "Mrs. Rodriguez, did your husband tell you about his diagnosis?" The woman turned pale. "What diagnosis?" "HIV, and how he got it." Lisa sank into a chair near the front door. Her hands were shaking. He said it was an accident, that he doesn't know where." "And you believed him?" A long pause. Then Lisa said quietly, "I overheard his phone call on Thursday night. He was talking to someone about a girl from the club, that she did it on purpose." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "And what did you do?" "Nothing. I couldn't believe it." "Mrs. Rodriguez, where is your earring?" "What earring?" Sarah took out the bag with the pearl stud. "This one. We found it in Lola Johnson's apartment." Lisa's face went blank. She reflexively touched the lobe of her left ear, where the earring was indeed missing. I lost it last week. I don't even remember where." "Mrs. Rodriguez, I think you should tell the truth. What happened on Friday night?" Lisa was silent for a few minutes, struggling with herself. Finally, she looked up at the detective. "She destroyed my family, my marriage, my children's lives. Tell me what happened." Lisa spoke slowly, pausing as if each word came with difficulty. "On Thursday evening, I overheard Frank talking on the phone. He was talking to a lawyer about the possible consequences of infection, about how the girl from the club did it on purpose. I realized that our life was ruined." Sarah was silent, giving her time to continue. "On Friday afternoon, I found the girl's address. Frank kept the personal data of his employees at home, in his office. I just wanted to talk to her, to ask her to explain why she did it." "And what happened?" "I arrived at her place around midnight. I knocked on the door and said I was Frank's wife and wanted to talk. She let me in." Lisa paused, her breathing becoming uneven. Lola was calm. She even smiled. She said she had been waiting for this conversation, that Frank deserved what he got, and that now our family would feel the pain she had felt. And then? I lost control. I grabbed the bottle of pills from her desk and started screaming that she had killed my husband and ruined my children's lives. And she just laughed. She said it was only the beginning, that soon everyone would know the truth about Frank. Sarah realized they were approaching the key moment. What happened next? She turned her back on me and went to the kitchen to get some water. She said it was time for me to leave, and I don't remember exactly how, but I grabbed her from behind by the neck. She fell and hit her head on the edge of the coffee table. Lisa covered her face with her hands. At first, I thought she had just fainted, but when I checked her pulse, there was none. I realized I had killed her. And the note? I panicked. I knew I would go to prison, that the children would be left without a mother, and that Frank would die alone. Then I saw her notes on the table, some diary entries about her illness, about her guilt. I rewrote one of them, changing the details. I wanted it to look like suicide. And the pills? I poured them into her mouth and made her swallow them, after she died, so the analysis would show an overdose. Sarah felt a mixture of professional satisfaction at solving the case and human sadness at hearing the story. Mrs. Rodriguez, do you understand what happened? Lola Johnson was murdered. You committed a crime. I know, whispered Lisa. I've thought about it every minute since that night. But she destroyed my family. She infected Frank with a deadly disease out of revenge. Is that fair? Justice must be served in court, not by private individuals, Sarah replied, taking out her handcuffs. Lisa Rodriguez, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Lola Johnson. You have the right to remain silent. As Sarah read the rights, Frank came down to the living room. Seeing his wife in handcuffs, he stopped dead in his tracks. Lisa, what's going on? Mr. Rodriguez, your wife has confessed to the murder of Lola Johnson. Frank sank into a chair, unable to believe what he was hearing. Lisa, what have you done? I was protecting our family, she replied quietly. What you couldn't do. At the police station, Lisa Rodriguez gave a full statement. She recounted the events of that night in detail, explaining how she had forged the note and made it look like an overdose. Technical analysis confirmed her words. Micro damage consistent with being grabbed from behind was found on Lola's throat, and fibers from Lisa's clothing were found in the apartment. Lisa's lawyer tried to prove that the murder was unintentional, the result of emotional stress and temporary insanity. But the fact that she had forged the note and staged the suicide suggested that the woman had acted deliberately, at least after committing the crime. During the trial, the whole story received widespread publicity. The media wrote about the HIV revenge case, corruption in the Las Vegas entertainment industry, and how the thirst for justice can lead to tragedy. Frank Rodriguez closed the Ruby Nights Club even before the trial. His business collapsed, his reputation was ruined, and his progressive illness prevented him from working. Tommy Sullivan got a job at another bar on the other side of town, far away from memories of Lola. Lisa Rodriguez was sentenced to 15 years in prison for second-degree murder. Her children moved in with their grandmother in San Diego. Detective Sarah Chen closed the case, but she couldn't forget the story for a long time. Too many lives had been destroyed by a chain of revenge and justice that had spiraled out of control. Lola sought justice for her infection. Lisa sought revenge for her broken family, and in the end, justice prevailed only in the courtroom, when it was already too late. Lola's mother came to Las Vegas for her daughter's funeral. The elderly woman with a cane and an oxygen tank couldn't understand why her daughter had gotten involved in this story. She knew Lola as a caring girl who sent money for treatment every month and called every weekend.